am Haunted Row, and this is my channel. My channel consists of history of places from the past and their paranormal hauntings. It also consists of personal experiences that I've had, and a lot of the places of the hauntings I can't really put on the channel because it's either too gruesome or too dark. But some are unexplainable and nobody really knows why these places are haunted. The Laural Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia is one of them. It may or may not be a mystery, but who knows? In 1853, Colonial Park Cemetery was officially full. There weren't any more plots to bury the dead, so new graveyard was commissioned. That was the Laurel Grove Cemetery in Middletown, Savannah. Laurel Grove is among one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the U.S. and most interestingly Victorian. With most of the graves being filled in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it has been said to resemble famous Victorian-era graveyards like Greenwood in New York and Père Lachaise in Paris. The Laurel Grove Cemetery is segregated. Blacks are buried in the south end, and whites have the north end. There are also Confederate sections with a memorial for the Battle of Gettysburg. Over 1,500 soldiers are said to be buried in there. The graveyard's most famous corpses are Girl Scout founder Juliet Lowe and the author of Jingle Bell, James Claypool. Like many other cemeteries, burial sites around Savannah, the Laurel Grove Cemetery is haunted. Phantom footsteps are common around the cemetery, and some have seen hands reach out from behind gravestones. Some visitors claim to have seen a mysterious woman dressed in a wedding gown vanish into thin air. And why is always a woman in white or black? Why can't it be like a woman in pink? You know, I don't know. Although, I have to say, from past experiences in Gettysburg, I haven't really put this on the channel because I'm not sure what I saw, but while on an investigation on a football field from the high school or college, one of the two, I swear I saw a soldier peek out from behind a tree. I'm not sure if it was a spirit or an actual person, because I think around that time it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock a.m. and I was shocked, and I stupidly forgot to turn on the flash at that moment on my camera, and I was like, darn. Anyways, there's also one ghost story dating back to the 1850s, when a trolley would pass through the area. Those who rode in the trolley past the cemetery would always hear the sounds of a child crying, even when there was no children present. The workers on the trolley claimed to have heard the sound every day for years on end. Many planners in Savannah were planning the Laurel Grove Cemetery in 1818, but never got around to laying out the ground since it wasn't necessary at the time. It wasn't until Colonial Park Cemetery was full that they needed the need for another city cemetery spurred the establishment of Laurel Grove. Why was that so hard? Before being turned into a graveyard, the land where Laurel Grove now sits was a rice field. At the time, people believed the Messiah theory of disease, where the spread of disease was attributed to bad air. Both rice fields and cemeteries were thought to be sources of messiahs. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and if I'm wrong, I apologize in advance. The large number of rice fields in Savannah was considered the terminal for the community. Excuse me. So rice began to be being paved. So the rice fields began to be paved over. For further protection, cemeteries and grave sites were moved to locations further outside the city limits. The rice field that would later become Laurel Grove was also filled in, and it was turned into a cemetery as it stood far from the city center at the time. Laurel Grove became Savannah's main burial site. Despite the Messiah theory, the cemetery was built in public space for picnics, as the Messiah was thought not to affect recreation visitors. Now, many prominent families burying their dead here. Savannah's wealthiest residents still open to burying their, still hoping, still opt to bury their dead to much more expensive Bonaventure Cemetery. Now, I heard about the Bonaventure Cemetery, and oh my god, I wouldn't go there. Like, really, I wouldn't go there. Especially about the story of little Gracie. Like, it's a sad story, but really intriguing at the same time. And if I get into it, and I will be talking about Bonaventure Cemetery. Laurel Grove is a segregated cemetery. Laurel Grove South was reserved for slaves and free blacks from Savannah and the Georgia coast. Laurel Grove North was for the whites and is also home to a small Jewish section and graves for Confederate soldiers. Before Laurel Grove, many of Savannah's African and enslaved people were buried in the old cemeteries, which are now occupied by Whitefield and Cawthorne Square. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right either, so bear with me here. After Laurel Grove opened, many of the graves were dug up and moved. No, there are still human remains in the original burial grounds. At the old African cemetery, blacks were buried using African tradition, where the dead were buried with symbolic items. Their personal belongings were often placed on top of their graves. After being moved to Laurel Grove South, their graves took on more European traditions as the cemetery discouraged such practices. Initially, the graves at Laurel Grove South were marked with wooden headstones, which degraded quickly. This is why many of the graves are unmarked today. As time went on, stones became more and more common. Laurel Grove South was originally much smaller than Laurel Grove North, but throughout the years it expanded from its original 4 acres to 90 acres, revealing the size of Laurel Grove North. The Laurel Grove South is the resting place of many prominent members of the Savannah civil rights movement, like Wesley Wallace Law, who helped integrate the schools in Savannah. Laurel Grove was reserved solely for Savannah's white residences. The cemetery filled up fast, where Laurel Grove still had plots available well into the 19th century. Laurel Grove North had already used up all of its grave sites in the mid-1800s. This makes the cemetery one of the most uniquely Victorian cemeteries in the country. The headstones are often Aryan and engraved with obelisks and crosses as common grave markers. Laurel Grove is crisscrossed with walkways and paths, as well as open spaces for the public to enjoy. Many of Savannah's wealthiest and most influential people are buried here, including one of the city's mayors. The Silence Memorial is a large statue dedicated to the Confederate deaths in the Battle of Gettysburg. Over 1,500 Confederate soldiers are buried in the cemetery's Confederate section. A small area for Jewish graves exists in Laurel Grove as well. Those stories from Laurel Grove Cemetery also go all the way back to the beginning of the graveyard in the 1850s. Just after the cemetery was established, a trolley ran through the area and passed right by the graveyard. Every day, those riding the trolley claimed to hear the sound of the children crying as they passed the Laurel Grove. They never saw the child, but they always heard the crying, no matter what time of day or how many times they passed by the cemetery. The trolley workers claim the crying went on for years on end. Strange enough, they claim that only riders on the trolley car number 28, could hear the cries. The crying has long since stopped, but the mystery has yet to be solved. Darn it! Those visiting the Laurel Grove Cemetery today are in for a spooky surprise. While the beautiful honorary headstones and the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees might entice you to take a stroll, the ghosts and spirits call Laurel Grove home will send you packing. A beautiful woman in a white dress has been spotted multiple times in different areas of the graveyard. Nobody knows who she is, perhaps a runaway bride. Most people don't notice she's a ghost until she mysteriously vanishes behind a tree or headstone. She appears most often during the daytime, though she's been seen at night as well. Some of the ghosts at Laurel Grove prefer to remain unseen. Visitors have reported sounds of heavy footsteps around the cemetery when nobody was around. The phantom footsteps usually move in sync with their target and seem to trail right behind them. Many visitors to the cemetery have felt the sensation of being followed around the graveyard, only to turn around and no one was there. Some also reported seeing a disembodied hands reach from behind the gravestones. They tend to slowly reach towards people standing nearby when they're not paying attention, then quickly retreat behind the headstone when noticed. Nobody knows whether or not these hands are attached to a body, but they seem to be free floating. Now that one kind of creeped me out. I saw this video. I can't really explain it because it really creeped me out when I was younger, and it still kind of messes me up. And it has to do with hands. So yeah. Locals familiar with the area and the cemetery say that voodoo practitioners and witches use the Laurel Grove Cemetery to perform witchcraft at night. A few people have stumbled upon the rituals, but since the cemetery is closed at night, these claims are very hard to verify. Now, if these are witches or voodoo practitioners that are in the cemetery at night and the cemetery is closed, how do they get in? Then they use witchcraft or voodoo? Or are they just smart enough to get past the security? Well, I don't know. But it sounds like there's a lot of creepy things at Laurel Grove Cemetery that I would like to find out one day. Anyway, thank you for watching my channel and videos. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I am Haunted Girl, and this is my channel. I'll spook you later. Until next time, pleasant dreams.